Do you know Dr. Werner von Braun from 1912 to 1977 was one of the most important rocket developers and champions of space exploration in the 20th century. As a youth, he became enamored with the possibilities of space exploration by reading the work of science fiction authors. Later, von Braun encountered the work of Hermann Oberth, whose 1923 book The Rocket into Planetary Space prompted von Braun to master calculus and trigonometry so he could understand the physics of rocketry. From his teenage years, von Braun had held a keen interest in space flight, becoming involved in the German Society for Space Travel in 1928. As a means of furthering his desire to build large and capable rockets, in late 1932, he went to work for the German army to develop liquid fuel rockets. Based on his army-funded research, von Braun received a doctorate in physics on July 27, 1934. The V-2 ballistic missile, the antecedent of US and Soviet intercontinental ballistic missiles and space launch vehicles, was the primary brainchild of von Braun's rocket team. After 1937, they worked at a secret laboratory in Peenemünde on the Baltic coast. A liquid propellant missile 46 feet in length and weighing 27,000 pounds, the V-2 flew at speeds in excess of 3,500 miles per hour and delivered a 2,200-pound warhead to a target 200 miles away. First successfully launched in October 1942, it was employed against targets in Western Europe beginning in September 1944. The V-2 assembly plant at the Mittelwerk near the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp used slave labor, as did a number of other production sites. Von Braun was a member of the Nazi Party and an SS officer, yet was also arrested by the Gestapo in 1944 for careless remarks he made about the war and the rocket. His responsibility for the crimes connected to rocket production is controversial. By late 1944, it was obvious to von Braun that Germany would be destroyed and occupied, and he began planning for the post-war era. Before the Allied capture of the V-2 rocket complex, von Braun was sent south, eventually to Bavaria, and surrendered to the Americans there along with other key team leaders. For 15 years after World War II, von Braun worked with the US Army in the development of ballistic missiles. As part of a military operation called Project Paperclip, he and an initial group of about 125 were sent to America, where they were installed at Fort Bliss, Texas. There, they worked on rockets for the US Army and assisted in V-2 launches at White Sands Proving Ground, New Mexico. In 1950, von Braun's team moved to the Redstone Arsenal near Huntsville, Alabama, where they designed the Army's Redstone and Jupiter ballistic missiles, as well as the Jupiter C, Juno 2 and Saturn I launch vehicles. A Jupiter C orbited the first US satellite Explorer 1 in 1958. Von Braun also became one of the most prominent advocates for space exploration in the United States during the 1950s, writing numerous books and several articles for magazines such as Collier's. Von Braun also served as a spokesman for 3 Walt Disney television programs on space travel, Man in Space. In 1960, President Eisenhower transferred his Rocket Development Center at Redstone Arsenal from the Army to the newly established National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. Its primary objective was to develop giant Saturn rockets. Accordingly, von Braun became director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center and the chief architect of the Saturn V launch vehicle, the super booster that would propel Americans to the moon. At Marshall, the group continued work on the Redstone Mercury, the rocket that sent the first American astronaut Alan Shepard on a suborbital flight on May 5, 1961. Shortly after Shepard's successful flight, President John F. Kennedy challenged America to send a man to the moon by the end of the decade. With the July 20, 1969 moon landing, the Apollo 11 mission fulfilled both Kennedy's mission and Dr. von Braun's lifelong dream. In 1970, NASA leadership asked von Braun to move to Washington, D.C. to head up the strategic planning effort for the agency. He left his home in Huntsville, Alabama, but in 1972, he decided to retire from NASA and work for Fairchild Industries of Germantown, Maryland. He died in Alexandria, Virginia on June 16, 1977.